Hello, everyone. We are extremely excited for this episode, Rare Hope, Accelerating Treatment Discovery for Rare Diseases. We have today Nina Frost and Simon Frost, who are co-founders of Rare Hope, a charitable organization focused on advancing science for rare diseases. Thank you both for joining us. Really excited to have you. We always ask the question, what is on your mind? And actually, we forgot to decide who was going to answer it. So I'm going to pick on Nina to, to jump in.
Too slow.
What is on my mind? Well, it's tricky because I want to have a happy, light conversation, but it's actually really hard in our world sometimes to do that because there is a lot of heavy stuff that kind of lands on us sometimes. And I think that's been, the last few days have just been like, oh man, we're grappling with people we know are sick and they're things that are hard. And it's, so I don't mean to be a downer with the start of the conversation, but balancing.
But it's an interesting question because one of the things about charities is you've got to, you've named your charity Rare Hope because you have to give hope in order for people to want to give their time, their resources, etc. How do you balance that of sort of this is both a heavy topic, but also something that you got to keep that hope out there.
And I think part of our name is also a bit of a play on words because it's actually rare in the rare disease community to have much hope, right? Like there are isolated families, isolated patients, people who don't really know what the future is going to look like and how to achieve a better future for their patient. So, but delivering hope, I think, is absolutely critical to what we're doing. What do you think, Sai?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about what I've been thinking about because we're always juggling so many balls that it's hard to kind of keep up with our own minds. But recently we've been scrambling to write speeches for the ATP 183 symposium, which is our big symposium every year for our disease. And so we've been kind of forced to think about the path forward, how to articulate it. And that's been the main thing that's been on my mind. But, in the background, just juggling lots of things.
So I want to pick up on that, Simon, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, it's always a challenge, I think, in the kind of work that you all do. You have so many different constituencies, right? You've got the scientists, you've got the potential donors, you've got the patients and their families and so forth. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on how do you weave a story that is compelling but is able to adapt to all these different audiences?
We kind of have positioned ourselves as a hub for all of these groups, and the orbits maybe don't all line up there, but we're in the center there, and we kind of have this constellation of people and organizations and entities who we either represent or who we work closely with, or who we are making a really strong, in my mind, case for support from, right? And I think there's a lot of overlap between what those messages are, that we have to kind of be an inspiring, leader in the field across all of those different kind of domains. And I think we've done that carefully by establishing a huge amount of subject matter expertise and credibility and relationships and hard work.
Absolutely. Oh, sorry, Eric, are you going to say?
No, go ahead.
So one of the things that we talked about when Eric and I first met you, Simon and Nina, is this idea that about that you just mentioned about being a hub for for rare diseases in general, right? I know you all started sort of focusing on a specific disease, but have sort of expanded your focus beyond that to all rare diseases because you felt like there is an opportunity to learn things across, and share those learnings across rare diseases where there isn't as much focus sort of naturally. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How is that sort of kind of positioning as a hub? How is that sort of going at this point? Where do you see it going? And I'd love to hear your take on that since we haven't talked about it in a while.
I think Nina's pausing so I can say it, but we obviously have the same thoughts in mind. We have basically a three-pronged approach at this point for Rare Hope. The hub is the first, and that's connecting a lot of different people. We can talk about who all those people are. And then the second is a platform approach, which is essentially standardizing, systematizing, centralizing, and it's doing those three things with respect to lots of different processes and tools like mouse models and cell lines and therapy development. And the third, so it's investing in therapies that are not just single therapy that we're hoping for the best on. It's this JP Morgan type portfolio approach where we're de-risking our opportunities, but and also giving our patients the best shot at a successful outcome.
And so, Simon, I mean, I know in your other roles in the world, you're the CEO of Tiber Capital Group, and there's obviously, I imagine there's big differences between starting a charity, running a charity, and running a real estate focused company or whatever. And I'm just kind of curious, and maybe just in general, Nina, you can jump in as well. How do you feel like this building a charity has been unexpected, different, et cetera, from either corporate or experiences that you've had in the past?
Well, I was surprised at the similarities, really, Eric, because I mean, I do buy real estate, but I buy single-family homes, and I've bought many thousands since 2008. And the thing that strikes me with single-family homes is that they're unique, right? They've got unique characteristics across the board, from location to size to what type of construction they have, and what type of renovations they need. Mm-hmm. There's so many different nuances to the property that it makes it unique. And it's the same thing with patients. I mean, patients are so unique with their mutations, their diseases, and the idea that you can build systematized processes around unique assets and unique people is what I find most interesting.
What I find most interesting is that, Simon's finding commonality. Nobody else is finding commonality. Like, this is because Simon has this process-oriented experience, right? Like, this is the lens through which he sees the world. This is the kind of insight that Rare Hope is trying to bring to the rare disease space, leveraging Simon's experiences elsewhere and applying them in a place where research is fragmented. There's silos. People aren't coordinating, right? Like, and they want to. People meet all the time. Everybody is wonderfully collaborative in this space as far as they can be. But comparing side-by-side research doesn't really happen, right? Like, looking at omics across multiple diseases doesn't really happen. Developing therapeutics as a platform that can be applied for multiple different genes doesn't really happen. And so to have the perspective of taking a diverse set of things, standardizing them, and kind of creating an assembly line of how to grapple with them in a way that is efficient and makes sense. Like, it's actually a special thing. I think that Simon, like, he might see it now. Rare Hope sees it, but that's one of the unique things I think about our organization.
So I want to ask you guys a question going back to this, and one other thing, Nina, that you brought up, which is resources. And we know that I work in healthcare, so I do know that the space of rare diseases is, comparatively speaking, underfunded, which means that big pharma and big companies, they just don't bring quite as much pull and resources into this space, as compared to many other disease states where you can make all your money back, etc. In the environment like that, I would imagine your organization brings in a very needed service, right? So my question is, how does your constituent base, aka the researchers, the workforce in the field of rare disease, how do they find out about you? How do they know about you? And what do they most appreciate about you?
I think, over the years, we've really just established this network of really great scientists. I think we're working with really field leading, David Liu's of the world, right? Like, people who are famous, who are moving the needle in science more than anyone else in the world. And I think as we've built a network of these, leading scientists at the Broad or Boston Children's or Harvard or Northwestern, we're kind of, there's a gravitational pull to it. And I think, it's interesting because as we are in an environment where government funding is a little bit uncertain, we have the rare disease space where there isn't necessarily as much industry funding. Now there's government grants that are a little bit uncertain, right? And maybe a lot uncertain in many cases. And so figuring out how we can fill that void is something that is, it's something that we're really trying to contribute there. And hopefully by filling that void with some philanthropic funding, I think there is an opportunity for, philanthropic investors to move the needle significantly in the rare disease space. You can move the needle with relatively moderate investment. And I think that's something that should be appealing to investors. And I think we're finding that it is.
Are you all working with international as well as US-based groups? Are you bringing in, is that something that you're able to sort of leverage to maybe balance some of the scientific situation in the US?
It's worse because the NIH won't necessarily allocate funds to researchers outside the US right now. So when you have a project that has an international team of, 10 different institutions who are participating, instead of, the kind of former philosophy that this is great, that there's this multi-institution collaboration, now all of a sudden the international funding is under threat. So it actually has been complicated.
Yeah. I'm going to jump back to a sort of an idea, I think, Simon, that you brought up a couple minutes ago, which I'm going to sort of categorize as this kind of analogical thinking. Like, how do we take sort of analogies of other industries or other diseases or whatever? And I think there's something really interesting about, to the point of like, people don't want to focus, the drug companies don't want to focus on rare diseases because they're looking at it from the perspective of there is only, a small population. So there's not a lot of money that we can, kind of bring back here. It's not worth it to us to do this. There's not a lot of funding, whatever it is. But it's really, I just wonder, and maybe this is something that you all have thought about, like, it almost strikes me that if you focus on these more rare diseases, but think about them broadly because there's not as much funding, that you may be able to find whole different approaches to, therapies and treatments, et cetera, that because you have to be sort of more scrappy, you have to think about them kind of as analogies to each other and so forth. I don't know is that something that's sort of come up in this thinking around this idea of, bringing the rare diseases together into a hub, if you will?
Yeah, well, I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Jeff. I mean, this is the whole idea with expanding into other diseases. We've got these rare diseases that, 1 in 10 of us in the world have a rare disease. So that's probably 800 million people worldwide. And if you think about 80% of that being genetic, we've got an enormous number of people worldwide that are affected by these diseases. If you think about them as an individual disease, yeah, there's no money there for treating them. But when you think about the treatment options available for those genetic diseases, there's a small bucket of them. And if you can produce that small bucket at scale across diseases using commonalities instead of individualities, then it becomes viable. And then it becomes an approach that becomes, economically, morally, and a huge proportion of your population, socially, it's an obligation. And that's the way we feel about it.
And we also feel like there's a lot of opportunity in the rare disease space, right? Like there is a target. If there's a monogenic condition, there's a target for this dysfunction that's cascading afterwards, right? Like, what it's coming from. But you also have this different kind of attitude toward risk. I mean, rare disease is a place where there's a lot of really severe symptoms, right? Like if you look at statistics, 30% of children diagnosed with a rare disease won't live to see their 5th birthday. So there is a population that is willing to take risks with novel therapies, right? Like the regulators are more willing to approve novel therapies. Clinicians are more willing to kind of feed that machine, right? The innovation can be adopted more easily where there is a different risk profile. And that is, you know, another kind of place where we can see some real opportunity in rare disease. And when you think about things like gene editing, I mean, that is something that is potentially the whole world can benefit from this, right? Like, it's not just a few rare disease cases, but if you're establishing the technology in these few cases, in these, you know, one-offs that we're trying to transform into a platform, like it's an exciting space to be. And the innovation there is really exciting too.
But there's also this. Oh, go ahead,
Nina.
Oh,
we all want to talk.
Yes, Nina, very exciting stuff. We're going to line up to talk about. So I wanted to ask you about the patient angle, right? Because you were just talking about the different risk profile, that the community is more accepting of risk in regulatory as well as physicians. Let's talk about patients. By definition, rare disease, very often longer to diagnose, right? They don't know where to go for resources. Resources are scarce. How do they find out about these therapies? And what do you guys see in this space? What is done and what could be done for the patients and caretakers, right?
I think Simon should answer this because he's done a ton of work with whole genome sequencing.
Yeah, so I was going to say, before I answer that question, Nina was bringing up a really good point before this too, which is, you know, we've got this wide population of people that have these rare genetic diseases and a huge, you know, we've only got 20 to 24,000 genes in the human genome. We have a Rosetta Stone to really understand human biology. I mean, we can understand the dysfunction of those genes by looking at rare diseases. And if we take a common approach, like Nina was mentioning, whole genome sequencing, identifying, centralizing data like whole genome sequencing, other omics data like proteomics, transcriptomics, and then start really using better analytics. I mean, we have the tools, we have AI now to be able to analyze these large data sets. It's a huge benefit to not just people with rare diseases, but biology in general. So that's that I think is important.
It's tricky with pharma, right? Because pharma is, you know, obviously being public companies, and they're going after the short-term, you know, stock price, you know, kind of driven approaches, but doing the big thing, right? Doing that thing where you start to understand the full genome, the full proteome, all of the effects, et cetera, is, as you said, hugely important, not just for specific rare diseases, but for human health in general. What's the challenge? How do you go about, how are you thinking about convincing the sort of pharma, or are they doing it on their own? Maybe I'm misunderstanding where they're going, but it feels like that's not the direction they're going. I tried to get a company going a couple of years ago to generate data across the entire proteome, and couldn't get anywhere with it. So I'm guessing it hasn't changed that much, particularly in this economy. What is your thought on how do you move the needle to get pharma to see that this is a rising tide which will lift all boats, as opposed to a waste of money or you know, something that's just going to take too long?
So go ahead, Nina.
We both open our mouths and appear like we're going to speak. Sorry about our lack of coordination, but I was going to talk about it. Yeah, no, you guys, yeah, it's all in the family, right? Exactly. So what I was going to talk a little bit about the gene editing space, where, you know, I think the technology is there, the science is there, the commercial viability isn't there. But in order to get to a point where you're commercially viable, you need some successful programs. You need some success stories like Baby KJ, and you need to kind of really get momentum around that. So you need not just one disease, not just one outlier. You need a platform for doing, you know, say a subset of a dozen genes, a subset of a dozen mutations, right? Like if we can kind of expand from the one-offs to that, you know, how can we create a process and a platform for more? I think there is actually some appetite. And I think it's not just an altruistic appetite. I think there really is this thought in that space, at least, how do we get from where we are now to a future where this is a technology that is widely available, and how do we get from like nothing to something big? And so I think that's where we're really trying to play.
You know, it's a fascinating thing. As you're talking, I'm having, so I last year I taught marketing at UMass Boston. I'm going somewhere with this that's related, and you know, and I would teach about you know, Blockbuster Video versus Netflix, right? And it's like, this is an infuriating thing in this particular situation because you're talking about kids' lives, but you know, in some ways, big pharma may be in its sort of blockbuster moment, right? Like where they're so focused on one approach to getting, you know, like there's this codified, like this is how we develop drugs. And so this really interesting thing that you're getting at is like at some point somebody is going to you know, in some other part of the, you know, in part of the sort of scientific community is going to go figure this out. And it may, and it could, you know, essentially wipe out their business because they're doing it the old way. And so I sort of say that have to be like, I don't think there's any big pharmas listening, but like, hey, big pharma, like you might want to be focusing on this stuff because solving these problems from a holistic perspective, as opposed to trying to solve, you know, and sort of saying all we're going to do is go after this same old sort of approach that we're doing, which, you know, is the best approach that we've had for years and years, but may not be the best approach that we have in, you know, a century, especially to Simon's point, given that we've now got the ability to use analytics in totally different ways. We can really get a better understanding of the human genome and what maps to what and all those kinds of things. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that was my brain leaping to Blockbuster versus
Netflix. I think that's a great analogy. I mean, the idea that we had to go, you know, and pull one video off the shelf every week and take it back on time rewound. That's kind of a very good analogy for the rare disease world. But yeah, back to Eric's question too, and I think it ties to your question, Jeff. Approaching how we gather these data and centralize them and analyze them, I think is a stepwise approach. And we're starting to see why Netflix is better than Blockbuster now in the rare disease world, slowly, right? Step by step. And one example is whole genome sequencing. It seems to be the foundational data set that we should build upon as a society. And we have the building blocks in place to do that. Medicaid already sees the benefit of paying for diagnosis, rapid whole genome sequencing especially, and centralizing those data sets so that we can make sense of them for other patients. And patients on the other side are more than willing to provide their genomes for research purposes. So it's starting to be a congruence of interest.
And there's starting to be some outputs that aren't just data consolidation, right? Like I think that's the other piece that's kind of exciting. If you're thinking about drug repurposing, they're algorithms to predict drugs that will be effective. Yep. And, you know, we've worked with a company that has a great algorithm that is, the algorithm uses a dysregulated transcriptome and predicts which drugs will regulate it back to what it should be. Mm-hmm. And it's a super interesting approach. And I think, you know, as with all algorithms, the inputs are just critical, and, you know, it's maturing, and, you know, that's something that's happening across the space where there are new tools and nobody's quite 100% confident in them yet. And we've got to validate them, and we've got to do a lot more work. But I think having that, like the ability to take all these data and analyze them in ways that, well, actually you can repurpose all of these drugs that might now be useful across multiple disorders. I mean, there's actionable output that could really shorten a timeline. And, you know, I think that's something that's really exciting to us as well as a foundation.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Jeff, the Netflix Blockbuster thing, and I think the direction that's coming from is the tech bio as opposed to the biotech. Like I think to some degree that's starting to happen where, you know, and actually when I was starting to do the work that I was doing a couple of years ago, Google was one of the most interesting partners that we were talking to because they were seeing it the way that you guys are talking about it. But meanwhile, talking about tech as a transition, Jeff, do you want to let ChatGPT jump into the conversation and see what ChatGPT is thinking about today?
Absolutely. So, all right, do you guys? I always ask the question, do you want absurd first or thought-provoking first? So,
absurd.
Absurd. Oh. It's not that absurd, but whatever. It says, which has more rare occurrences, the diseases you're fighting or nonprofit founder actually getting 8 hours of sleep? So.
It's a good question from ChatGPT. I'll add a third question to that, actually, just for additional absurdity. Is it, the third rarity is, the number of parents that have led the path towards actual therapies for their children across the 10,000 diseases.
Absolutely.
There are a few like real trailblazers, right? Like it's actually a paradigm that's much more common than it is in any other part of medicine, right? That there are rare disease parents who suddenly take up this role that they never expected to have. And then they move mountains. And it's something that, people are doing it in their own ways, but it's something that's unique and really special about the rare disease space, that you can actually, as a patient, parent, move the needle. But it's also heartbreaking, right? Like, why should you have to? You're left with nothing. You have no choice, right? It's one of those kind of dual messages where there are things that are possible, but gosh, you really wish it didn't have to be you.
Right.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to ask you this one's maybe a little more thought-provoking, and this is ChatGPT's wording, so I'm just going to go with this. What's the moment when you realized Rare Hope wasn't just a good idea, but something people would actually rally around? And did that moment make you laugh, cry, or both? So, there's my thought-provoking question.
Yeah, so Annabelle was diagnosed when she was 2 years old. It took 2 years to get diagnosed. And when I realized that, it shouldn't have taken that long. We had all the tools and knowledge and research and so on to diagnose her faster, but she was getting misdiagnosed just because she's rare. That struck me as something avoidable. And then, the idea that we're not using these commonalities to good effect to advance research, advance the centralized tools that we have available. It seems like really low-hanging fruit that Wall Street folks would kind of get in a heartbeat, and the scientific biotech community is not quite getting it.
On that same note, go ahead.
I was going to tell you my moment, but it's not that exciting. I mean, it's kind of exciting. It just happened today. I mean, I knew it before today that it was something that we should invest our time and energy in, but I was talking to one of our favorite researchers today, and he does work in 2 of our mouse models. And he put up all this data, and he said, it's absurd to say this, but this is the first time ever that I have looked from this mouse model in this disease to this mouse model in this disease to this mouse model in your disease. Like, this has not been done before. And to me, that is a phenomenally crazy thing. Like, we're thinking about testing the very same drug across all of these animal models and across patient populations, but to compare the actual electrical brain activity across these mutants hasn't been done before. Like, and and we were kind of laughing at how ridiculous that was, because it seems like it's such an obvious thing to do.
Right. And I think it goes back to
you're looping in these, so in your work, you're looping in the MDs, you're looping in the PhDs, you're looping in the families, et cetera. And you're talking about, like, this is an exciting thing, from a point of view of, like, nobody's seen this before, et cetera. Are people excited? I mean, it's these connections that you're making that's driving these sort of different ways of thinking. Are the people you're working with excited to be doing the work in a different way with different people and not kind of like being, or, I guess the alternative would be, are they like, oh no, I have to talk to the MD again as a PhD? Like are people excited about that model?
I think we work with a lot of people who share our vision for the future. And whether it's developing a platform therapy like a gene editing and applying it across lots of diseases for lots of patients, or whether it's looking for commonalities of biology across diseases that are adjacent and make sense to study together. Like, I think we operate already in a world of like-minded people who have this bigger vision for what the future could be. And I think they're happy to be going down the path with us.
Absolutely.
So on this subject, given that traditionally the industry is very siloed, right? it is a little bit of a kind of mind-changing and transformation and change management path. So what have you guys noticed that works well for you, taking the industry on that path?
Yeah, so the way Nina and I kind of think about this, Elena, is we've got all these geniuses kind of sitting in their bedroom scribbling on their windows, right? And we've got to figure out a way to bring those folks together. And honestly, like when we do it often, and it's definitely not always the case, but when we do bring them together, they're so thankful and happy to be dealing with somebody else that's an expert in an adjacent area that things start to synergize quickly. And you know, when someone sees that someone else understands the work that they've been doing and is contributing to a joint effort that's 1 + 1 = 10, it gives everybody energy. And I think that that's been part of our job, has been to connect those dots. But it doesn't come without, you know, a real understanding of what's available in the field, and also of the work that's being done by those people that are, you know, geniuses scribbling on windows. So it takes some sophistication, and Nina has really put that together.
What are they scribbling on the windows?
I'm looking for analogies.
When you go to labs, you know, and people have a lot of the buildings now, Simon, you probably well, maybe not in the homes, but like they have these glass walls, and people take their whiteboard markers and they write it all over them. Like that's very common. So they literally are. So when you said that, I laughed because they do scribble on the windows all the time. I just want to say, this, as always, this half-an-hour episode always flies by, so we're a little over, but that's all right. It's been fantastic to hear your thoughts and hear how you guys are going about this. Before we leave, what we like to do is go around and have everybody say one thing they want to leave the audience with. What I don't tell our guests usually is that I usually make the guests go first. And since there are two of you, I have to pick one. But since I picked Nina in the beginning and put her on the spot, Simon, you get to go first. What's one thing that you would like to leave our audience with?
I think that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in rare diseases. And then if we just take a practical approach, common sense, and we do things in a way that benefits society, we're going to get there.
And I just want to, we're having a conversation around rare disease, and those of us in the rare disease world think that's really interesting. But those who aren't, it's like rare. Why do I care about that? Like, this is rare. It's uncommon. Why should I think about it? But I think really going back to Simon's point about how large the rare disease population actually is in the world, we're talking about a diverse but a big group of people, and what's happening across that group should matter to everyone.
And so I'm going to put on the screen here, but I was asked before I give my one thing, what's the best place for people to find out more or get in contact with you? So I put rare-hope.org on the screen, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add before I dive in. No? All right. So for me, I'm going to build, Nina, on your point. And say, I think that this idea of like changing the mindset about how we think, again, back to the Blockbuster versus Netflix, like how do we stop thinking about rare diseases, to your point, as every individual, sort of disease has a tiny little population, and think about, hey, we need to deal with this huge group, huge portion of the population who are impacted by rare diseases, and then also change the way we think about the development of treatment, and think about are there sort of therapeutic processes and approaches that actually allow you to address whole swaths of disease. And I think that what you were talking about, this idea of like looking at three disease states at the same time and going, what is the commonality here, and saying, hey, there, not only does that help you say, hey, I could use this thing that I'm using over here, also over here, but also is there something that is common about these three, things that actually could be done together. So I think there's a mindset shift in the way we think about, because we've sort of been in this sort of analog world of, treatment and therapy development, we're missing out on a whole different way of thinking about it. And I truly believe the AI tools are going to really enable that as well. Elena, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So I will build onto the different thinking and say that the world has changed, and we have mountains of healthcare data available, and healthcare data, it's dirty, it's disjointed, and very often people don't remember the password, but it exists. And it is incredibly important that this mind change happens, that healthcare data has a lot of value, and looking at it holistically, analytically, and Jeff just brought AI. AI is one of the tools, and many others can really change the way we develop and treat and look at therapies in rare disease, and frankly speaking, in every disease, if we are diligent and also very conscious that the world is now very different, and we have to some degree a gift in this data, which we all, for some reason, and that's a subject of another many hours of podcasting, why do we not look at it? Why do we think it's somebody else's problem? We are all consumers of healthcare in some shape or form. So thank you for everything you guys do, and thank you for giving the data to a chance to play a role in this treatment.
Yeah, and my one thing is, I want to pick up on the point that both of you have brought up, which is there's an opportunity that rare disease creates in learning about how to treat human disease in general. That big thing, understanding the genome, the proteome, the whole system helps us all. And the last thought I would have is that in some ways, I think we all ultimately will get to the point where we understand that everybody has a rare disease, and that they're in the sense that their health is very unique to them. And this whole concept of precision medicine or personalized medicine is kind of like, the people were talking about 15 years ago, and has really kind of not been realized in the same way that my car doesn't drive itself yet. Is like, we need to get to that point. And I think rare diseases, the ones that are considered rare today, have a really strong opportunity to be driving that charge towards being able to treat everybody's sort of unique health situation. And I think that's a really interesting outcome. Fascinating work that you guys are doing. Excited to keep watching where Rare Hope is going, and excited to see all the success, and of course understand that it can be frustrating and difficult, but we're all very thankful that you guys are out there doing this. Thank you.
Eric, you made such a good point. I just want to kind of underline that personalized and generalized medicine are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Personalized medicine at scale is something that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know we're kind of going over here, but like the fact that we could actually sequence all human genomes of everyone alive is a very, very different situation than we've ever been in. We can actually have all of the data on some level. Anyway, thank you both so much for joining us. This has been fascinating, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you so much. You guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you.